Again, we'd like to welcome you to Berean Bible Fellowship this morning. We're continuing to walk through the Bible, and right now we should be finishing up 2 Samuel. We're getting into 1 and 2 Kings. But this morning I want to bring a message out of 1 Samuel, chapter 13 through 20. So, sometimes I can spend a whole hour on one verse, so buckle up. We're going to go through 6 chapters in a short period of time. I've titled this Losing to Win in the Life of Jonathan. I want to focus on the life of Jonathan this morning. And as we think about the life of Jonathan, I want to kind of put some things into perspective. We live in a culture of winning. And again, the title is Losing to Win. And we live in a culture of winning. We live in a place that places value on winning. In fact, so much so that we scorn the losers. And, to say that, he's a winner, if we were to look at somebody and say, that guy over there, that girl over there, they're a winner, that is to pay a great compliment to that person. He or she is a great person, a great guy, a great gal, a great person. They're a lot of fun to be around. They're the life of the party. They're a good person. They're a winner. Now, on the other hand, if we say someone's a loser, and we were to be talking to a bunch of friends and go, that guy over there is a loser, that is a put down. That is an insult. He's worthless. He's no good. He's no fun. He's someone you should avoid. He has nothing to offer. He's the loser. A put down. We've been conditioned this way by great coaches. Henry Russell or Red Sanders said it this way: winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. And Vince Lombardi, I love Vince Lombardi. He's great for quotes. Winning is not a sometime thing. It's a all the time thing. And I can just picture Vince Lombardi saying that. A child psychiatrist might say, or a child psychologist might say, winning brings benefits for children. For children's development, such as increased self-esteem and confidence boosting, strategic thinking skills. So winning is good. Now they go on to say, but winning at all cost, however, the experience of winning at all cost in sports often inhibits, by the well-intentioned parents, and we've all been on the sidelines, and I've been guilty of this. Encouraging the boys to win can be very unenjoyable. So sometimes winning isn't everything. Winning isn't everything. And that's countercultural. But Jesus would say it this way in Matthew 10:39. Don't look these up. I'm just going to fly through some things real quick. In Matthew 10:39, Jesus would say, whoever finds his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. He repeats himself in 16:25. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Now, the Gospel of Mark adds a little bit here to it. He says in Mark 8:35, for whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel will save it. Luke simply repeats Matthew in chapter 9 and chapter 17. Then John adds another little twist to Jesus' quote here. He says, he who loves his life loses it. Whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. So it's losing your life for the sake of the gospel and for the sake of eternal life. And so what I'm talking about here is losing to win. Now, Jonathan is a great example of this from the Old Testament. Jonathan is a phenomenal example of losing to win. If you were to look at the life of Jonathan, we'll see a man who lost everything. He lost the kingdom. Now, Saul sinned. We can go back and we can see where Saul sinned, and God said, I'm going to cut off Saul's family from inheriting the kingdom. I'm going to find another man after my own heart. And he finds David to take over the kingdom. But Saul died as the king. Who really lost the kingdom? The heir. Jonathan is the one who was the real loser here, because Saul was king. Saul died the king. And Jonathan, the heir of the throne, because of his father's sin, never became king. Think about what's going on here. And he chose to embrace his role. But Jonathan, if we look as we study through Jonathan's life, he chose to embrace his role. He chose to embrace his role and that God had given to him. He protected David, God's anointed. He said, I know I'm losing everything. I'm not ever going to be king because of what my dad did. But I'm going to serve God faithfully anyway, in the role that he has given me. And he won the title Servant of God. You know, we first hear about Jonathan in chapter 13 and 14. And we learned that he was a mighty warrior. Turn with me to Samuel chapter 13. I'm going to do what I did last week. I'm not going to read a big passage to set up the message this morning. I'm going to more like walk us through some passages to fill in the story of Jonathan's life. So 1 Samuel 13, 3 and 4. And I apologize last week. I guess I invented a whole new book of the Bible, First Colossians, because we were in first this and first that, and for some reason I just put a first in front of Colossians. But there really is a First Colossians. There's just not a second. But so anyway, so I apologize for that. So hopefully I get the Bible's verses and chapters right this week. But 1 Samuel 13, 3 and 4. Jonathan defeated the garrison of the Philistines at Gibeah. The Philistines heard of it, and Saul blew the trumpet throughout the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. And all of Israel heard it said that Saul had defeated the garrison of the Philistines, so that Israel had become the stench to the Philistines, and all the people were called out to join Saul at Gilgal. Now Saul took the glory, but Jonathan was the one who defeated the Philistines. He was the one who was leading the battle. Then we turn to chapter 14. And being a military guy, chapter 14 is kind of an intriguing chapter because chapter 14, Jonathan does a surprise attack. He does a sneak attack. This is a two-man assault on the entire army of the Philistines. I mean, this is a covert operation, undercover, behind enemy lines, kind of a deal. You know, this is things that heroes are made of. Verse 14, chapter 14, verse 1. One day Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who carried his armor bearer, come, let us go over to the Philistine garrisons on the other side. But he didn't tell his father. Again, this is covert. Nobody knows what's going on. Just Jonathan and his armor bearer. Drop down to verse 6. Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, come, let us go up over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving us by many or by few. Amen. This is a two-man covert behind enemy lines operation. Jonathan and his armor bearer. And his armor bearer said to him, do all that is in your heart. Do as you wish. Behold, I am with you, heart and soul. Then Jonathan said, behold, we will cross over to the men, and we will show ourselves to them. Not very smart, but it worked. If they say to us, wait until we come to you, then we will stand in our place, and we will not go up to them. But if they say, come up to us, then we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hand, and we shall be the sign to us. So both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, look, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden themselves. So they just think there's a couple guys here who've been hiding in the holes in the ground and they're trying to escape. The men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, "Hey, come up to us, and we'll show you a thing." Kind of like, we'll show you a thing or two. We'll teach you a lesson or two. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hand of Israel." Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and his feet, and his armor bearer after him. And they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer killed them after him. And the first strike which Jonathan and his armor bearer made killed about 20 men. So they came in from this rear position. They came in this backward attack, this covert attack, and they took out 20 Philistine soldiers within half a furrow of length of an acre of land. And there was a panic in the camp. This covert attack is coming in from the back, because the Philistines couldn't believe that, hey, they're only going to send 2 guys in? That don't make sense. So they thought there's a whole bunch of Israelites coming in from behind, and so they panic. They go into a deep panic in the field among the people. The garrison, even the raiders, trembled. The earth quaked, and it became a very great panic. So this covert operation created a tremendous panic in the Philistine army. And the watchmen of Saul at Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude was dispersing here and there. So this created chaos. It created panic through the entire Philistine army in disarray. And Saul's scout looks up and says, "Hey, the Philistines are losing it." And then Saul joins the battle, and he joins the fight, and they have victory over the Philistines. So as we follow the life of Jonathan in 1 Samuel, you'll see that he was a mighty warrior. That's a really quick story, a really quick illustration. But if you go back and you read the story of Jonathan, you will see that Jonathan was a mighty warrior. He was a hero of Israel. If you read all the way to chapter 31, you realize that Jonathan died in battle. He died a soldier. He died in battle. Yet, if you look again at the whole book of 1 Samuel, the song in chapter 8, verse 17, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands, and Jonathan isn't even a thought, isn't even an afterthought, not even a footnote. Yet he was as much of a hero, as much of a war hero in the nation of Israel as Saul or David. Because I tell you what, to sneak in with you and one other guy into the rear area of a garrisoning of a standing army of 20 or 30,000 men is a gutsy move. I mean, that's Medal of Honor type of courage. And yet he got no glory. None at all. Keep that in mind. After David was anointed king, I'm jumping down to 1 Samuel 16 now. 1 Samuel 16. After David was anointed king, Jonathan and David became best of friends. I'm going to read verses 1 through 5. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. Besties, best friends, BFFs. Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. He loved him as he loved himself. Brothers. They became brothers in a way that day. Jonathan, this is the part I want you to think about. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David. His armor, even his sword, his bow, and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul sent him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people, and also the sight of Saul's servants. I want you to realize what's happening here. Think about what's going on here. You're Jonathan. You're a mighty warrior. You're a hero in the nation of Israel, in the armies of Israel. You should have got a a medal of honor for your covert action against the Philistines in the garrison against the Philistines, but you didn't even get a line in the song. You're the heir. You're the heir to the throne. You're next in line behind the king. You're second only to the king. You're an heir to the throne of Israel. But because of your father's sin, God has chosen to take the kingdom away from the family of Saul and give it to the family of David. In the process of that, God has taken the kingdom from you. Now put yourself in Jonathan's shoes here. He's as much of a hero as David and Saul, but he don't get a line in the song. He's heir to the throne. He's number 2 in command of all of Israel. But because of his father's sin, he's never going to be king. And Jonathan knows this. And so what he chooses to do is to take on his role. And he becomes best friends with the man who's going to take his place as king. He doesn't become his enemy. He doesn't become his adversary. He doesn't get angry with him. He doesn't get bitter. He doesn't get frustrated. He goes, "Hey, David, here's my sword. Here's my shield. Here's my armor. Here's my robe. Here's everything that identifies me as the Prince of Israel. It now belongs to you." Talk about courage. Talk about understanding his role in God's kingdom. They became best friends, stripping himself of his armor, his sword, his bow, and his belt, and giving them to the man who's going to take his place as the next king of Israel. A place, an honor that should be Jonathan's. You should be king, but God has chosen David, and Jonathan embraced his role. He embraced his place. Accepting God's role, accepting the role that God has given you, giving David his princely garments. The question first to think about as we look at the life of Jonathan, the thing I want us to think about here, one of the things I want us to think about is, have we accepted our role? Have we accepted the role that God has given us? You see, each and every one of us has a role to play in God's kingdom, in God's church. We all have a place. We all have a role. What is God asking us to do? What is God asking us to do? Is pride and envy standing in our way? Are we letting pride and envy stand in our way? Because Jonathan could very well done that. Hey, I'm heir to the throne. I'm number 2 in command. And he could have joined Saul in attacking David. But he accepted his role. He accepted his role. And he embraced David as the next king. Is fear standing in the way? I'm afraid to do this. I'm afraid to do that. I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do that. I've never done that before. Jonathan did not wear easy shoes to wear. He did not have an easy road to walk, but he embraced it. This is what God has given me to do. This is what I will do. But it goes beyond that. It goes even deeper. God says, I want a little bit more from you, Jonathan. I want a little bit more from you. I want more than stepping aside, more than embracing God's will in your life and embracing David as king. I am now going to ask you to risk your life. I'm going to ask you to put your life in jeopardy, to risk your life, to save the life, to protect the life of the man who's going to be given your glory. You're going to be an afterthought in the story. You're going to be just the son of the king. Saul's going to be the king. David's going to be king. You're just going to be a bit player in the drama. But your role is going to be to protect the man, to save the man's life, who should get your glory. Look at chapter 20 here. Turn to chapter 20. And David came to Jonathan for protection. Chapter 20, verses 1 to 4. And David fled from Noah and Ramah. And he came before Jonathan. What have I done? What is my guilt? What is my sin before your father, that he seeks my life? And then he said to him, far from it. You will not die. Behold, my father does nothing, either great or small, without disclosing it to me. Remember, Jonathan is number 2 in command. Why would my father hide this from me? It's not so. But David vowed again, saying, your father knows that I have found favor in your eyes. He knows we're best friends. And he thinks, don't let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord lives, as your soul lives, there is but one step between me and death. So David convinces Jonathan that there's just one step between him and death, because Saul wants him dead. In verse 4, Jonathan said to David, whatever you say, I'll do. Whatever I need to do to protect you, I'll do. So David and Jonathan developed this plan to find out what's truly on Saul's heart. David's going to hide in the field for a couple days. And again, you can read this, and I'm leaving a lot of holes in the story because I want you to go back and read the story. Kind of giving you the highlights. So David's going to hide in the field for a couple days, and he's going to miss the celebration of the new moon. Now, Saul's going to notice David's not there because David is supposed to be in Saul's household. It's kind of a twisted plot here. He wants him dead, but yet he's living in his household. It's kind of a strange situation here, but Saul's going to notice David's missing from the table, from the banquet table, and Jonathan's going to say that David had to go home for a family celebration. That David, his older brothers, remember David was the younger, his older brothers demanded and commanded him to come home for a family celebration, for a family feast. And so David had no choice and he had to go home. Now, if Saul gets mad, Jonathan's going to get word to David. If Saul doesn't get mad, he's going to give word to him another way. And that story kind of plays itself out here in verses 20 and 23. And Jonathan says, I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I shot at a mark. And behold, I will send a boy, saying, go find the arrows. If I say to the boy, look, the arrows are on this side of you, take them, then you will come, for as the Lord lives, it is safe for you, and there is no danger. But if I say to the youth, look, the arrows are beyond you, then go, for the Lord has sent you away. And as for the matter of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever. So they continue with this plan. Now, as the story goes, Jonathan shoots the arrows past David, and he tells the young boy, the arrows are beyond you. David knows he has to run for his life. Jonathan sends the young boy back into the town, so it's just Jonathan now and David in the field, and Jonathan and David get to come together for one last final brotherly embrace, and they part ways. They part ways because the only place for David to be safe is out of the presence of Saul. And this nearly cost Jonathan his life. Drop down to verse 30 and 34. This act of rebelling against the king, protecting David, fulfilling God's role in his life, listening to what God's telling him to do instead of what his dad's telling him to do, fulfilling God's role in his life, going against the king, nearly cost Jonathan his life. And Saul, I'm picking up 1 Samuel 20, verse 30. Then Saul, angered, was kindled against Jonathan, and he said to him, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman. I guess that must be an insult. Do you not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? I mean, he's really slamming him verbally here. I mean, I don't understand the translation exactly how this would translate it, but he's giving him a piece of his mind here. For as long as the son of Jesse lives on earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Paul's reminding Jonathan, you can't be king as long as David's alive. Therefore send and bring him to me, and he will surely die. Saul's saying to Jonathan, let me kill David so you can become king. Then Jonathan answered Saul, his father, why should he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan comes to David's defense. Now, he's already devised the plan that David could escape by. But Saul hurled a spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. And Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month. For he grieved for David because his father disgraced him. Before we move on, I want to just jump back to verse 23 of that same chapter. As far as for this matter for which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever. This is referring back to the covenant. Back to the covenant. Verse 13 and 17. But should it please my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan more if I do not choose you and send you away, that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. If I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord, that I may not die. Do not cut off your steadfast love for my father's house forever. So Jonathan and David make this covenant. See what happens again back in these times, back in these ancient times. If someone came to power, a king came to power, he would have the person or anyone who was a threat to his authority, a threat to his kingdom, put to death. Often, when a person would become king, he would even have his own brothers killed, because they would be threats to the throne. Because brother number 2 is number 2 in line. So if I get rid of number 2, then there's no one number 2 in line. But then number 3 becomes number 2. So they would even kill their own brother. So it's very common for in those days that when a new king came to power, that anyone who was of the opposition party would be killed. And so now David and Jonathan were best friends. So Jonathan knew he didn't have to fear David. But again, as you study, if you read through the book of 1 and 2 Samuel, you'll notice that there was a lot of people who thought they would do the king a favor. And so it would be very possible that one of David's men, one of David's supporters, would kill Jonathan, thinking he was doing David a favor. Okay? And so think about what's going on here. Again, I want you to think about what's going on here. The prince of Israel, the heir to the throne, is risking his life on a two-front battle. His dad wants to kill David, and he's defending David in the throne room of Israel, and he gets a spear thrown at him. He's like, I can't even go home because my dad wants to kill me because I'm on David's side. But on the flip side of that, I have to fear David's men, because David's men may think they're doing David a favor and kill me. So Jonathan says to David, hey, if I happen to get out of this alive, if I happen to survive this alive, please don't kill me. But if I don't survive this alive, don't kill my family. Don't kill my sons. And David makes good on this promise later on in the book of Samuel with Jonathan's son. I can't say his name. You have to read it. But he makes good on his promise. But think about what's going on here. Jonathan's life is in danger on multiple fronts because he's supporting David. Now, all Jonathan had to do was kill David. Kill David, and he would be the next king of Israel. That's that simple. But instead, God said, no, I want you to protect David at the peril of your own life. I want you to protect the life of the man who's going to get your throne. The one that you are in line for. Just think about that. Just think about what's going on here. Jonathan risked it all. He held nothing back. He gave it all to follow God's plan for his life. He protected the man who will be king in his place. Jonathan truly is the unsung hero of 1 Samuel. That's what I want you to think about. Jonathan is the unsung hero of 1 Samuel. A warrior, a friend, an heir to the throne. And he was able to step aside. He was able to put his personal pride aside. He was able to put personal gain aside. He was able to put his personal glory aside to fulfill the role that God had for him in his life. So again, the question I ask of today is, what role is God asking you to play? Where is God asking you to fit into his kingdom? Where is God asking you to fit into his greater plan? Jonathan, the heir to the throne of Israel, was asked to play second violin his entire life. My daughter was a violinist. She started playing violin when she was barely old enough to hold a violin, and she became very good at it. She was concertmaster. She was first chair of a very good orchestra, very prestigious orchestra in St. Louis. The gal who was the first chair before her now plays for the St. Louis Symphony. And so Cindy had first chair. And the first chair would be like, they're like number 2 in command of the orchestra. The conductor's always back off stage, but the first chair's warming up the orchestra. They're bringing the orchestra into tune. You always see the first chair violin bringing the orchestra into turn and warming up the orchestra, getting them all ready to go, so that when the conductor comes on, they're ready to play. But no one ever thinks about second violins. No one ever thinks about first chair, second violin. First chair, second violin is the unsung hero of the orchestra. Because what happens if you don't have second violins in an orchestra? There's a massive hole in the melody. But someone's got to lead those second violins. Someone's got to lead them. Now, so if you think about it, if you have 20 violins and you go, the best 10 are playing first violin and the next 10 are playing second violin, then all your weaker players are playing second violin. Well, you can't do that, because you'll have no harmony. Because the first violins play melody, the second violins play harmony. And you need the second violins to make the music come alive and come together. So oftentimes what an orchestra leader will do is they'll take their second best violinist and say, I need you to be first chair second. I need you to lead the seconds. Now the first chair violin, number 1, best violinist in the orchestra, gets all of the glory. Second chair, or first chair, second violin isn't even in the program. You see what I'm trying to say here? God asked Jonathan to play second violin his entire life. I want you to serve in the shadows. You have a very important role. If you don't do your role, the whole world's going to see the gaping hole in God's kingdom. My plan won't work if you don't do your job. But you're going to get zero glory, not a mention in the program, no bylines, no trophies, no honor, no awards, not even an honorable mention. Nothing. Jonathan, I want you to play second violin. You should be first violin. You should be first chair violin. But I want you to play in the shadows. But I need you to do your job so that the harmony of the church, the harmony of God's kingdom will be full. We all need to play the role that God has given us. Every one is important. Every role is important. The harmony of the church is most beautiful when everyone is here and when everyone is taking their place in the service in God's kingdom. There are no small tasks. There are no insignificant tasks in the church. Again, where would the orchestra be without second violins? It would be empty. The music would not be as full. There's no insignificant tasks. Handing out bulletins making coffee, cleaning the bathrooms, preaching are equal. Let me say that again, they're equal. There's no higher or lower task. Everything needs to be done. The church needs to work in harmony. Sometimes God will ask people to step aside, to step down, so that others can step into the spotlight. Maybe you've been here, maybe you've been serving, maybe you've been doing something, but God's been working on somebody else, and we need to step aside. We need to step down. We need to step over, let somebody else step into the light. Jonathan needed to step back and hand his robe to David. The princely robe to David. Sometimes God will ask us to give up things that we desire. Something that we've maybe earned or something we're entitled to. Again, like Jonathan, the throne of Israel. To give up our personal glory so others can step into God's glory. We may be asked to serve in the shadows so that others may see the glory of God. Jonathan is the example of that. He lost to win. Jonathan is the hero warrior who served his father faithfully. He served David faithfully. He served the Lord faithful. He's a man whom God used to protect his chosen, yet he remains almost an afterthought in the story of David and Saul. He's an afterthought. A man who served in the shadows of great men, yet a man that God used to make history. So again, a question I leave us with today: what is God asking you to do? There's no task too great, no task too small, if it's the one that God has called you to do. Turning back to Matthew 10:39, quoting Jesus Christ. Whoever loses this life for my sake will find it. Jonathan knew that. Jonathan lived that. And that is our challenge as a church as we leave here this morning. Let's close in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to celebrate the Lord's Supper and to be reminded of what you did for us on Calvary. To see the life of Jonathan as the example of a life that we should live. One of service, one of sacrifice. One that looked like he lost it all, but in losing it all, he gained the greatest glory because he did exactly what you had him to do. He played the role exactly the way you wanted him to play it. And in doing so, he made history. And he is now in the history book because he followed your plan and did things your way. In your name we pray.